What Sarah thought was a fresh start with her new husband Jack, a man she believed to be a tragic war hero, soon became her worst nightmare when, one fateful day, she discovered the horrifying truth about his missing wife, hidden away in the basement of their home, forcing her to confront the terrifying reality that her husband was hiding a dark, twisted secret. Sarah Mitchell had never believed in love at first sight, not until she met Jack Turner. She was volunteering at a veterans charity event in downtown Portland when she saw him standing alone near the photo wall, staring at a picture of a unit deployment. He had a quiet intensity, the kind that drew people in without saying a word. His right hand trembled slightly when he held his coffee, and there was a distant look in his eyes, like he'd seen too much and said too little for far too long. He was tall, lean, with streaks of silver already touching the edges of his dark hair, though he couldn't have been older than 35. There was something magnetic about him, something broken but not defeated. They spoke briefly at the event. Sarah introduced herself and Jack's responses were measured but polite. He wasn't charming in the usual way, but his vulnerability was disarming. When she learned he was a war hero, she was impressed but not surprised. He had the demeanor of someone who'd carried too much weight and didn't want to be congratulated for it. She found out later from another volunteer that Jack had served multiple tours in Afghanistan. His last deployment ended in tragedy. His wife Emily had gone missing while he was overseas. She had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few belongings and a swirling mystery that the police never solved. Sarah had heard the story before, years earlier. It had been in the local news, a missing woman, a heartbroken husband away at war and no answer. The case faded from headlines, but people remembered. They sympathized with the young soldier who came home to nothing. Jack became a local figure of quiet tragedy. Women wanted to fix him. Men respected his silence. But Sarah didn't approach Jack as a project. She saw a man who had survived loss and kept moving. They started seeing each other casually, meeting for coffee, walking through the city, sometimes sitting for hours without saying much. He wasn't open about his past, and Sarah didn't push. She assumed he'd share when he was ready. Instead, he asked about her life, her job as a pediatric nurse, her parents back in Idaho, her dreams of living somewhere quieter. Jack was different from anyone she dated. He didn't text constantly or flood her with compliments. His affection came in small, deliberate gestures, a warm hand on her back, a blanket tucked around her on cold nights, meals cooked without being asked. He had nightmares sometimes. She'd wake to find him sitting upright, breath shallow, sweat clinging to his skin. He'd never talk about what he saw in those dreams. He'd only whisper, "It's nothing," and go back to sleep like nothing happened. They married a year later in a small courthouse ceremony. No big plans, no family gatherings. Jack didn't like attention. He told Sarah he wanted a fresh start, a life untouched by the past. So when he suggested they move into his old family home in rural Oregon, she agreed. He said it was where he felt most at peace. Sarah pictured long drives, quiet evenings, and a chance to truly begin their life together. She had no idea that behind his steady gaze and gentle hands, Jack Turner was hiding something far darker than sorrow. The house stood alone at the edge of a dense forest, surrounded by towering pine trees that blocked most of the sun during the day and cast long, distorted shadows at night. It was older than Sarah expected, with peeling paint on the porch and ivy climbing the sides like fingers trying to hold it together. Jack had inherited the house from his parents, and though he hadn't lived there in years, he assured her it had good bones. Sarah tried to see it the way he did, as a place of healing, a fresh chapter. But from the moment she stepped inside, something felt off. The air inside was cold and still, as though the house had been holding its breath for a long time. Dust clung to the furniture and the floorboards groaned under every step. There were personal touches, family photos tucked into corners, old books on warped shelves, but they looked forgotten rather than cherished. It was clear no one had lived here in a long time, at least not comfortably. Sarah offered to clean it up, to breathe life into the old walls. Jack said it wasn't necessary. He liked it the way it was. Sarah began to settle in, unpacking boxes and hanging their clothes in narrow closets that smelled faintly of mildew and something else she couldn't place. Jack busied himself with repairs. He changed light bulbs, patched cracks and spent long hours in the basement. He always locked the door behind him. She asked once what he was working on. He smiled faintly and said, "Just clearing out old stuff." When she asked if she could help, he told her it wasn't safe with all the tools and loose wiring. The subject was dropped. Days passed, and Sarah noticed strange things. The power would flicker for no reason. She'd hear sounds, soft thuds, dragging noises coming from beneath the floor, especially at night. Once she heard what she thought was a faint voice, maybe the radio left on by mistake. When she followed the sound, it vanished. Jack claimed the pipes were old, the house just settled, but the noises didn't sound like pipes, and the house never truly felt still. She began to feel watched, even when she was alone. The feeling would come suddenly while brushing her teeth, while folding laundry. At first she chalked it up to nerves. She'd moved into an unfamiliar house with a new husband, far from friends and family. Of course it would take time to adjust, but the unease didn't fade, it grew. One evening, while Jack was in the basement, she tried the door out of curiosity. It was locked as always. She checked the junk drawer for a spare key but found only loose screws, receipts, and batteries. The lock itself looked newer than the others in the house, shiny, unmarked, as if it had been replaced recently. Sarah told herself to let it go. If Jack wanted privacy, that was his right. But something about the basement lingered in her mind like a shadow in her peripheral vision, always there, never quite in focus. And slowly, the house that was meant to be their fresh start began to feel like a place frozen in someone else's nightmare. The locked basement door became a silent presence in Sarah's daily life. It sat at the end of the hallway near the kitchen, closed tight with a deadbolt that gleamed unnaturally against the faded. Every time she passed it, she felt a subtle pressure in her chest, an awareness that something wasn't right. At first she tried to ignore it. She busied herself with decorating the rest of the house, planting flowers in the yard, and repainting the upstairs bedroom. But the sense of being kept out, of something hidden behind that door, never truly left her. One rainy afternoon, while Jack was out running errands, Sarah found herself staring at the basement door again. The house was quiet except for the soft patter of rain against the window. Her curiosity had grown over the past few weeks, fueled by the strange noises she kept hearing at night, and the way Jack always avoided questions about the lower level. She remembered the old junk drawer in the kitchen, the one filled with random bits and forgotten items. This time, she dug deeper. She found a small tin box at the very back, buried under old receipts and expired coupons. Inside were several keys, some rusted, some shiny. Her hands trembled slightly as she took them out and tried each one in the lock. None fit. The bolt didn't budge. She even tried turning the knob without unlocking it, but it was completely secure. Frustrated, she returned the keys and closed the drawer quietly. She didn't want Jack to know she had tried. That night, she watched him closely as he unlocked the door after dinner and disappeared downstairs. He didn't bring tools or cleaning supplies, just a flashlight and a thermos. He stayed down there for nearly an hour. When he came back up, his shirt was damp with sweat, and his eyes looked darker, more sunken. He didn't speak. He just kissed her on the forehead and went straight to the shower. Sarah started to pay attention to his routine. Jack always went into the basement when it was dark, never in the morning, always at night, usually between 9 and 11. He'd come back up quietly, sometimes humming under his breath, sometimes completely silent, and each time he'd lock the door behind him without fail. She began to have dreams. In them she was standing in the hallway, facing the basement door, and something was behind it, scratching, whispering, crying. The sounds followed her into her waking hour. She'd hear faint tapping when she was alone in the living room, or soft creaks beneath her feet when she walked across the floor. She started leaving a light on in the hallway at night, unable to sleep in the dark anymore. Despite everything, she never confronted Jack directly. Part of her didn't want to believe anything was wrong. She loved him. He had suffered so much. She told herself he just needed space, that the basement was his way of coping, of grieving Emily's disappearance. But another part of her, the part that was growing louder each day, couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Jack was hiding wasn't grief. It was something much darker, and the key to it all was just beyond that locked door. One chilly afternoon, Sarah decided to explore the garage while Jack was away on a trip to the grocery store. The garage was cluttered with old boxes, dusty tools and forgotten belongings stacked high along the wall. As she moved through the maze of clutter, something caught her eye, a large metal trunk tucked behind some wooden crates near the back corner. It was old, scratched and covered in a layer of dust, but it had a faded label scrawled on top, "Deployment." Curiosity got the better of Sarah. Knelt down and pried open the rusty latch. Inside were mementos of Jack's time overseas, photographs of his unit, medals of honor, letters written on worn stationery. The items painted a picture of a man dedicated to his country, proud of his service, and haunted by memory. But as she dug deeper, she found something unexpected, an earring, delicate and gold, its tiny clasp bent and worn. Next to it lay a torn piece of fabric, part of a blouse or dress, faded and stained. Her heart skipped when she pulled out a Polaroid photo, the kind with the white border curling at the edges. It showed Jack and a woman standing together in a kitchen. The woman was beautiful, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that looked tired but determined. Sarah's breath caught in her throat when she recognized her. It was Emily. But there was something strange. The kitchen in the photo looked exactly like the one in the house where Sarah now lived. The wallpaper matched, the counter layout was identical, even the chipped paint on the cabinets was the same shade of faded green. The photo had a date scrawled on the back in faded ink, 2 years after Emily had supposedly disappeared. Sarah's mind raced. How could this be? If Emily vanished while Jack was deployed, how could she be in this very house 2 years later? Was the photo real? Was it a trick? The more she stared at it, the more the unsettling truth began to take shape. She carefully placed the photo back into the trunk, her hands trembling. The other items felt heavier now, as if the weight of the secret they carried pressed down on her chest. She left the trunk slightly open and hurried back into the house, locking the garage door behind her. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. The image of the photo burned into her mind. The house, the photo, the missing years, they didn't add up. She thought about Emily, about the headlines she'd read so long ago. The police had never found her. No body, no clue, just a vanished woman and a grieving husband who became a local hero. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Could Jack have been lying? The man she married, the man she trusted, was he hiding something so dark and dangerous? She pushed the thoughts aside, telling herself she was jumping to conclusions, but deep down she knew this was only the beginning. The locked basement door suddenly seemed more ominous. What was Jack keeping down there? If Emily had been here alive and trapped, was it possible she was still somewhere in the house? The idea was terrifying, yet she couldn't ignore it. Sarah's trust in Jack was cracking, shattered by a photo and a few forgotten trinkets. The perfect story of a broken war hero was unraveling before her eyes, and the truth waiting to be uncovered was far worse than she ever imagined. After finding the photo and the small belongings in the garage, Sarah's mind was filled with questions she didn't dare voice aloud. She needed more information, but she had no idea where to start. One night she sat down at her laptop and searched for Emily Turner, hoping to find anything about what had really happened. The search results were sparse, mostly old news articles and forum posts speculating about the disappearance. But then she found a private social media page belonging to Emily's sister Claire. Using a fake profile, Sarah sent Claire a message. She didn't reveal who she was but said she had known Emily before she disappeared, and wanted to understand what happened. To her surprise, Claire responded. The messages between them grew over days, with Claire, and the truth waiting to be uncovered was far worse than she ever imagined. After finding the photo and the small belongings in the garage, Sarah's mind was filled with questions she didn't dare voice aloud. She needed more information, but she had no idea where to start. One night she sat down at her laptop and searched for Emily Turner, hoping to find anything about what had really happened. The search results were sparse, mostly old news articles and forum posts speculating about the disappearance. But then she found a private social media page belonging to Emily's sister Claire. Using a fake profile, Sarah sent Claire a message. She didn't reveal who she was but said she had known Emily before she disappeared, and wanted to understand what happened. To her surprise, Claire responded. The messages between them grew over days, with Claire sharing bits and pieces about Emily's life before she vanished. The struggles in her marriage, the tension building while Jack was away, and the police investigation that had gone nowhere. Claire hinted that the police suspected Jack but could never prove anything. The story that Claire told was chilling. Emily had tried to leave Jack before he deployed, but he threatened her, saying no one would believe her. When Emily disappeared, the police accepted Jack's version of events. He was a grieving husband, a soldier who lost his wife overseas, but Claire believed he was hiding something, and she had never stopped looking for the truth. As Sarah read Claire's messages, she felt a deep sense of dread. This wasn't just a missing persons case, it was a lie, woven so tightly that almost everyone had believed it, and she was living inside it, in the very house where the truth might be buried. That night sleep evaded her. The house was silent, but Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, loud and irregular in the dark. She lay awake, eyes fixed on the basement door down the hall. It seemed to glow with an unnatural darkness, daring her to open it. When Jack went to bed, Sarah stayed up, gathering courage. She wrapped a scarf around her hand and took a small hammer from the toolbox in the garage. She didn't know what she expected to find, but she knew she couldn't wait any longer. She approached the basement door slowly, heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst. The lock was newer than the rest of the house, shiny and unblemished. The keys she had found earlier hadn't worked. She raised the hammer and began to tap at the lock's edge, testing its strength. It resisted at first, but with steady, careful strikes, the metal began to bend. Suddenly the door gave way with a loud snap, sending a shower of splinters to the floor. The dark stairwell beyond yawned open, filled with a cold, damp air that smelled of earth and neglect. Sarah swallowed hard, shining her phone's flashlight down the step. The basement was deeper than she expected, and the beam of light caught old furniture covered in dust, crates stacked against the walls, and a narrow corridor leading further into the darkness. There was no electricity, no windows. The silence was suffocating. As she descended the stairs, the floorboards creaked beneath her feet. She felt a chill run down her spine. Somewhere deep inside she knew this was where the truth was hiding. The locked door wasn't just a barrier to a basement, it was a wall between her and a secret so dark it could destroy everything she thought she knew about Jack. With every step, the air grew colder and heavier. At the end of the corridor, Sarah saw another door, smaller, padded with foam, and locked tight. Her breath hitched. What was behind that door? She didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The narrow corridor at the bottom of the basement stretched ahead like a tunnel into darkness. Sarah's phone flashlight barely cut through the thick shadows. As she moved cautiously forward, the cold air wrapping around her like a shroud. The walls were covered in stained, faded foam padding, the kind used to muffle sound. The air was thick with dust, and something else, an odor she couldn't quite place but knew was unpleasant, sour and metallic. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound almost deafening in the eerie silence. At the corridor's end was a small, heavy door. Unlike the rest of the basement, this one was padded on the inside, and locked with a sturdy deadbolt, the kind of door built to keep something inside or out. Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Her mind raced, imagining what could be hidden behind it. Desperation took over. Sarah looked around and found a screwdriver among some old tools on a nearby workbench. She pried at the hinges, hoping to loosen them enough to open the door. The padding muffled the creak as the door slowly swung inward. Inside, the room was small and bare. No windows, no furniture except for a worn cot pushed against the far wall. The mattress was thin and stained. There was a metal tray with some dried food crumbs, and a half-empty bottle of water. The air was thick and stale, and the cold seemed to sink into her bones. On the wall near the cot, a thick iron chain was bolted tightly, the other end wrapped around a small, worn bracelet lying on the floor. Sarah knelt down to examine it. The bracelet was simple, with the initials delicately engraved on the clasp. Her breath caught. It was Emily's bracelet. A flood of emotions crashed over her: shock, horror, sadness. The woman she had seen in the photo, the missing wife, had been locked away in this room, hidden beneath the very house she now shared with Jack. The realization was almost unbearable. Sarah's mind reeled as she took in the details. How long had Emily been kept here? Was she still alive? The sparse food and water suggested someone had been there recently, maybe even still. The quiet padding on the walls was meant to keep the sounds from escaping, to silence any cries for help. Tears blurred her vision. She felt betrayed, terrified, and helpless all at once. The man she loved had lied to her in the most unimaginable way. Jack wasn't the grieving husband he claimed to be. He was a captor, a prisoner keeper. She stumbled back toward the basement stairs, her legs shaking. The walls seemed to close in around her, the silence heavier than ever. Sarah realized she couldn't stay there, not alone, and not without help. But how could she trust anyone? The police had dismissed Emily's disappearance as a tragic accident. Jack had fooled everyone. If she called for help without proof, would anyone believe her? Her mind raced with questions. Had Emily tried to escape? Had Jack threatened her family? How had he managed to keep this secret so well for so long? Sarah knew she had to act carefully. The man she thought she knew was a stranger capable of cruelty beyond imagination. The house that was supposed to be their new beginning was a prison, and she had just uncovered its darkest secret. Her next move would be the most dangerous yet. Sarah had to find a way to free Emily without alerting Jack. The truth was out, but the nightmare was far from over. Sarah's mind raced as she climbed back up the basement stairs, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The image of Emily's bracelet, the cold cot, and the padded walls burned in her memory. She felt a mixture of terror and determination. Terror because the man she loved was a monster, and determination because she couldn't let Emily suffer any longer. But she had no plan, no allies, and no idea how to confront Jack without putting herself in danger. For the next few days, Sarah moved through the house like a shadow. She kept her interactions with Jack calm and casual, never revealing what she had discovered. She watched him closely, studying his routines and moods, looking for any sign of weakness or guilt. Jack still went to the basement every night, locking the door behind him carefully. He never mentioned Emily or the past. He seemed calmer, but his eyes were cold, calculated. Sarah knew she had to gather evidence, something undeniable that would force the police to act. She began recording Jack's movements secretly, using her phone's camera when he was distracted. She photographed the locked door, the tools he carried, and the fresh footprints near the basement entrance, but the risk was high. If Jack noticed her snooping, the consequences could be deadly. One evening, Jack returned home later than usual. Sarah was waiting in the kitchen, pretending to be engrossed in a book. He hung his coat silently, avoiding her gaze. His silence felt heavier than any words. Then he went straight to the basement door, and unlocked it without a word. Sarah's stomach twisted. Was he about to go down and check on Emily, or was this a trap? She followed quietly, staying just out of sight. The basement was darker than usual, shadows stretching across the floor. Jack disappeared down the stairs, and Sarah held her breath, clutching her phone. She had to be ready. Suddenly, she heard muffled noises, soft groans and whispers. Her heart pounded. Jack was speaking, but the words were low and chilling. He was telling someone to be quiet, to stay still. The voice was faint but familiar. Sarah's breath caught. Could it be Emily? Without thinking, she stepped into the basement, flipping on the flashlight. Jack spun around, shock flashing in his eyes. The confrontation was sudden and raw. Jack lunged toward her, but Sarah dodged, backing up slowly. She yelled, "Who is she? What are you hiding?" Jack's face twisted in anger, then cold calculation. He snarled that Emily was dangerous, unstable, and that he was protecting her and everyone else. But Sarah saw through the lies. He was the danger. She realized this man was capable of anything to keep his secret. In that moment, Sarah knew she had to escape. She dashed up the stairs and out of the house, heart racing. She drove to the nearest police station and showed them the photos and videos she had taken. At first the officers were skeptical. Jack Turner was a respected war hero with no criminal record, but Sarah's evidence was undeniable. The locked basement door, the padded room, the muffled sounds. A search warrant was issued, and the police returned with her to the house. When they unlocked the basement, the discovery shocked everyone. Emily was there, weak, scared, but alive. She had been trapped for years, hidden in the basement by the man she once loved. The case exploded into headlines. Jack Turner was arrested and charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and assault. The perfect lie of the broken war hero was shattered. Sarah's courage had uncovered a nightmare that no one could have imagined. But even as Emily was freed and Jack faced justice, Sarah knew the scars from this secret would last a lifetime. The house, once meant to be a home, was a prison of betrayal, and the truth was more terrifying than anyone could have believed. After the police removed Emily from the basement, the quiet town of Portland was shaken to its core. The story of Jack Turner, the decorated war hero who had kept his wife imprisoned beneath his own home, spread quickly through news outlets and social media. People struggled to reconcile the image of a brave soldier with the horrifying truth of his secret life. Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight as the woman who uncovered the nightmare hidden behind closed doors. Emily was taken to a hospital for treatment. Physically weak and emotionally fragile, she was wrapped in layers of care, both medical and psychological, as doctors tried to piece together the damage caused by years of confinement. She couldn't speak much at first, overwhelmed by the shock of freedom and the terror of what had happened. Yet through tears and silence, it became clear that Emily had been held captive for nearly 4 years, trapped in the small padded room, with barely enough food or water. Sarah visited her every day, sitting quietly by her bedside, offering comfort without words. They didn't need to talk much. The shared understanding was enough. Emily's survival was a testament to resilience, but her future was uncertain. The trauma ran deep, and recovery would be long and painful. Meanwhile, Jack sat in a cold jail cell, stripped of his medals and his carefully constructed reputation. The man who had once commanded respect was now a symbol of betrayal and horror. Investigators uncovered disturbing details about his past, inconsistencies in his deployment records, unreported injuries, and a history of controlling behavior that had gone unnoticed by friends and family. The more they dug, the clearer it became that Jack had been living a double life: hero in public, captor in private. Sarah struggled with conflicting emotions. She felt anger and disgust toward Jack, but also sadness. She had loved him, believed in him, and had been blinded by the story he told her. The discovery shattered her trust, not only in him, but in her own judgment. She wrestled with guilt for not seeing the signs sooner, for moving into the house without questioning the past more deeply. The trial of Jack Turner became one of the most talked about cases in recent memory, drawing reporters, curious locals, and legal experts alike. Courtroom seats were filled every day, the air heavy with anticipation and disbelief. How could a decorated war hero, admired by many, be capable of such cruelty? The media dubbed it the basement case, a chilling reminder that evil can wear many masks. From the start, the prosecution presented a detailed, harrowing picture of Jack's action. They called experts to testify about the psychological abuse Emily had endured, how captivity and isolation shattered her spirit, and how Jack's carefully constructed facade had hidden years of manipulation. The padded room, the chains, the deprivation, all painted a grim narrative of control and terror. Sarah was called to the stand early in the trial. As she recounted discovering the basement and the evidence she found, her voice wavered, but her resolve never faltered. She described the fear, the confusion, and the moment she realized the man she loved was a monster. Her testimony was raw and honest, laying bare the emotional toll the ordeal had taken on her. Emily's testimony was even more powerful. Though still fragile, she spoke slowly but clearly about her imprisonment, the endless days in the dark room, the loneliness, and the moments of hope that kept her alive. She told the court how Jack had broken her down piece by piece, and how she had dreamed of escape even when it seemed impossible. Her courage moved many in the courtroom to tears. The defense tried to paint Jack as a man broken by war, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and unable to control his actions. They claimed Emily's disappearance was accidental, and that she had hidden willingly. But their arguments felt hollow against the mounting evidence and emotional testimonies. Throughout the trial, the community remained divided. Some found it impossible to accept that Jack could do such things, while others finally saw the truth behind the hero's mask. The case sparked difficult conversations about trust, trauma, and how victims often suffer in silence while abusers manipulate those around them. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. Jack Turner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but the scars ran deep. For Sarah, the verdict was bittersweet. She had helped uncover the truth and bring a dangerous man to justice, but the wounds left by the ordeal would take years to heal. She remained close to Emily, supporting her as she began the slow process of rebuilding her life. In the months that followed, Sarah dedicated herself to helping others trapped in abusive situations. She spoke at events, worked with survivor networks, and helped raise funds for organizations that provided safe spaces for victims. The nightmare she endured became a catalyst for change. Though the house on the edge of the forest was eventually demolished, its legacy lived on. The story of Emily's captivity, Sarah's courage, and Jack's betrayal reminded everyone that darkness can hide in the most familiar places, and that sometimes it takes one brave person to shine a light and set someone free. Months passed since the trial ended, and Jack Turner was locked away, but the echoes of what happened in that old house lingered for Sarah and the community. Life moved forward, but the shadows of betrayal and pain weren't so easily left behind. Sarah struggled with feelings that refused to fade: loss, fear, and the haunting question of how someone she loved could be capable of such evil. Emily's recovery was slow and fragile. With therapy and support from Sarah and the community, she began to reclaim pieces of herself that had been buried deep under years of captivity. Sometimes she smiled again, sometimes she cried, but each day was a small victory. Sarah stayed by her side, helping her navigate the world outside the basement's walls, a world full of bright light, noise, and freedom that was both overwhelming and new. Sarah's own life changed in ways she never expected. The betrayal left a crack in her trust, not only toward Jack but toward people in general. She found herself cautious, wary of being hurt again, but alongside that fear was a fierce determination to find hope and meaning from the nightmare. She poured her energy into advocacy, speaking at shelters and community centers about abuse and captivity. Sharing her story became a way to heal and to warn others. The house, which had stood silently as a prison for years, was finally torn down. The empty lot was left as a reminder, some said a memorial to Emily and all survivors of abuse. The community came together to plant trees there, symbolizing growth and renewal. What had once been a place of fear slowly transformed into a symbol of strength and resilience. Though Jack was gone from their lives, the questions about how he had managed to hide his dark secret for so long stayed with Sarah. She thought often about the neighbors who never suspected a thing, the friends who admired him without knowing the truth. It was a painful reminder of how appearances can deceive, and how important it is to listen and believe those who suffer in silence. One evening, months after the trial, Sarah visited Emily's grave, not the physical grave, but a quiet place in a nearby park where Emily liked to sit and find peace. They planted a small flowering tree together, a symbol of new life and healing. Standing there, Sarah felt a bittersweet mix of sorrow and hope. Emily's suffering had not been in vain. Their courage had brought light into the darkest of places. Life didn't suddenly become easy or perfect, but Sarah had learned something powerful. Even in the face of terrible betrayal, there was room for forgiveness, not for Jack but for herself and for Emily. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It meant allowing herself to move forward, to find strength in the scars, and to believe in the possibility of goodness again. The story of the basement, the missing wife, and the war hero's true face had ended, but its impact continued. Sarah knew she would carry the weight of what happened for the rest of her life, but she also knew that her courage had made a difference. Sometimes, the darkest truths can lead to the brightest hope, and in that hope they found freedom.